Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar with Experian. My name is Fern and I am part of the Student Success team at Target Jobs. And I'm really excited to be joined by some representatives from Experian who are going to be talking a bit more about their company, what they do, and kind of the areas that they work in as well. If you have any questions at all, then please pop them into the Q&A tab and the team will be going through and answering those at the end. But for now, I'm going to pass over to Amy, who's going to get things kicked off.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, hi everybody. So my name's Amy and I'm from Experian's Early Careers team. Thank you for joining our webinar today. So we're basing it, like you'll see on the screen, all around getting to coding. So at Experian, we are a tech organisation, so we obviously offer a lot of tech opportunities. So we're here today to talk to you about some of those and basically talk to you about how you could potentially launch your own career in tech. So we're joined by our graduate panel here today as well, who will be introducing sort of in the next couple of slides or so. But they'll be sharing some of their experiences with you. We'll also be sharing some top tips on our application process. And like Fern said, there will be some time for you to ask us some questions at the end as well. So do just drop those into the chat or the Q&A section, and we will make sure that we come round to those at the end. So just to start with some introductions then. Okay. Like I said, my name's Amy and I work in the Early Careers team, but we're also joined by some of our graduates today as well. So we've got Joy Ying and George, who are currently on our graduate software engineering programme. And we're also joined by Ali as well, who recently completed the programme, so is now working as a software engineer for us. So you'll get to hear from them sort of in the next few minutes or so. And yeah, you'll get to hear all about their experiences. And like I said, ask them any questions you have as well. But firstly, we're just going to start with a bit of an introduction into who are Experian. So when we ask people that question, they often say we're the organisation that you go to get your credit score checked, which is right. That's a huge part of what we do. But we actually do a lot more than that as well. So like it says on the screen there, we basically unlock the power of data. But what do we mean by that? So basically, we are the largest provider of data in the world, and we have a mission to achieve financial health for all. So what that means is that we use data to support individuals, to support businesses, and wider society to achieve better financial health. So it's all using data. On the next slide here, I've just included some examples of how exactly we do that. So like it says there, we gather, analyse, combine and process data to help people and organisations. So in terms of how we help people, that is where that whole credit score piece comes in. So it's about helping individuals to take control of their finances, basically. And you may have heard of Experian Boost, potentially. So that's a product that we have that helps individuals to boost their credit score by basically allowing them to share information on subscriptions that they have or rent payments that they make, things like that, to basically boost that credit score so they can obviously then take better control of their finances. We also work with businesses, which is maybe the area of Experian that people are less aware of. So we basically help businesses to understand their customers better so they can then meet their needs a little bit better. And we've just included two examples on the screen there of Sky and Centre Parks. They're two organisations that we work quite closely with. So yeah, like I said, that's maybe an area that people aren't as aware of. And we also work with wider society as well. So one way that we do that is with our support hub, which is a relatively new service that we offer. But it's basically a one-stop portal or one-stop shop where people with disabilities can upload their accessibility requirements. And we then basically share that with multiple other businesses. So what that basically means is that they get that better access to essential services like utilities and banking. So that's a super quick overview of what we do here at Experian, but it hopefully just gives you a bit of context when we then move on into sort of what our graduates do. And just to finish, I've just included here just some of the organisations that we work with, Because if you're still not sure on what Experian do, you'll definitely be aware of some of these organisations. So I'll just pick Sky because I know that was the one on the previous slide as well. We basically work with Sky to help them to understand their customer data better. So then they can target TV adverts to the demographics of different households. So if anybody here has got a Sky account, the adverts that you get are probably quite different to what other households get because it's all based on that data that's shared with Sky. So like I said, that's a really quick overview, but hopefully that's just given you a bit of an insight into some of the work that we do. So we're going to be moving on now to meeting our graduates. So we're going to start first of all with Joy Ying. If you could just do a bit of an intro.
Hello everyone, my name is Ju Ying and I'm currently a graduate software engineer in Experian Data Quality, which is a business unit in Experian that develops data management solutions for businesses to enhance the quality of their data. I recently started my role in September, so it hasn't been that long. But before that, I was studying my bachelor's degree in computer science and maths at the University of Manchester. I first got introduced to coding in secondary school, but what really made me enjoy it was being challenged to think creatively to solve problems. I also liked being able to apply things that I learned to improve the way I code, and I just see coding as a means of supporting people in their daily lives. My favorite thing about software engineering is finding and fixing errors in code. Although it might be a bit frustrating at times, it's also a very valuable experience because you get to explore different parts of the code base you might not be familiar with, and also learn how more experienced software engineers might code.
Perfect, thank you. George.
Yeah, so hi, I'm George. I'm a graduate software engineer in ECS. So ECS is sort of the side of Experian that the general public directly interact with. So like the B2C part of the business. So if you go to experian.co.uk or use the Experian app to look at your score or report, that's us. But a lot of the data and stuff we use comes from other parts of the business. Sort of started coding, doing little gamey projects, and then went to university. Now mostly do web stuff, but still do a little bit of games, personal stuff on the side. So yeah, I'll keep it short.
Perfect. And then Ali.
Hi, my name's Ali and I'm a software engineer at Experian. I first started working in the identity and fraud department, which provides ways to verify identity and prevent fraud for Experian's clients. And now I'm part of Marketplace, and that department focuses on eligibility. I started on the grad scheme in 2022. So that's been like 2.5 years now. And for my education, I went to the University of Nottingham, where I completed my 4-year integrated course in maths. And I chose coding because my favourite part of university was the coding projects we had. I really liked applying maths to solve problems in the real world. And my favorite thing about software engineering is learning new things all the time and working with new technologies.
Perfect, thank you. So hopefully you've all got a bit of a better idea now of who our panel are, and they're going to be talking you through next sort of what does a software engineer at Experian do. So we're going to start first of all with Joy Ying and sort of talking about how software engineers don't just code.
Hi. So before starting my role at Experian, I haven't had any previous experience working in the industry before. So my initial impressions of software engineering were quite limited to generic things like working in a team or being given stuff to code. However, after working for a couple of months, I soon realized that there was much more to that than I thought, but in a good way, of course. So generally, when you're working on a project, it can usually be broken down into 4 phases in the simplest of terms. The first being the planning stage, and this is where features you want to implement for your product are created and documented, detailing any technical requirements. They are then broken down into user stories. These are small tasks that make up a feature and are written from the end user perspective. As a software engineer, some things that you might be involved in is supporting user stories by breaking them down even further so that they're more manageable. Or depending on your role, you might even get involved in supporting UX or user experience design for how the overall product will look like. Personally, I haven't had much experience in the UX design, but sometimes in my team, we would share ideas and feedback on like smaller design choices. And so alongside feature documentation, user stories also have acceptance criteria, which detail the outcomes an end user should expect after completing it. Both of these help software engineers plan their approach to coding, but ultimately how you implement it is up to you. This leads to the next phase, developing code, which is probably more familiar to some people. So one thing I noticed was that at university, I was more used to working on projects with just a few files, but coming into this role, it was a bit intimidating because you were hit with such a large code base of many, many files. But I just want to say that you shouldn't worry about it because usually you will just be working on a particular part of the code base. So you don't immediately need to get familiar with everything. It will take time, but as you code more, you also gain more knowledge. So during this stage, you can pick up user stories to do, and it might seem like it's more independent, but I found from my own experience that it's really helpful and important to communicate with your team in terms of either getting feedback or if you're working on a particular feature, it might overlap with someone else's code. But we do use something called Azure DevOps, which is a tool that helps with collaboration, organizing your code, and managing things like code conflicts. As a software engineer, you would also be expected to create automated tests, which was something new to me coming into this role. But it's really important to write tests as a software engineer to ensure that the changes you make don't break the code. So the third stage is testing code. Usually you would have members in your team who are responsible for QA or quality assurance. So they help test your code, find any bugs, and make sure that the product is up to standard. During this stage, they might communicate back to the developer if they find any bugs that need fixing. So there's quite a bit of back and forth between these two middle stages. As a software engineer, you can also log any bugs that you find yourself. And also, apart from user stories, you can also pick up bug fixes to do. I've done quite a few bug fixes and I've always found that there's so much to learn from it. So after development is the final stage, which is to push live. This is where you want to release a new version or product to the client. Currently, for the project I'm working on, we expect to release a new version of our product in April, which is really exciting. But that also means I don't have much experience of this phase yet. But from what I gathered from Ali, who is more experienced, pushing live involves raising a ticket for client-facing environments. So this means describing and evidencing any changes you want to release to understand the impact of the work, and also scheduling a day and time for it. Usually you would do user acceptance testing using a sandbox, which is essentially a testing environment for untested code. So you can try out new features and monitor that nothing breaks down. After which it will be released to the production environment, which simply means that it's now available to clients. So to summarize, being a software engineer is not just about coding. You get involved in a lot of things, a bit of everything, whether that's creativity from UX design or testing. And you also get to develop some soft skills, such as working in a team and organization. And that's all from me, and I'll hand over to George.
Yeah, so when you first start coding, sort of the the variety of languages, frameworks, technologies can be really overwhelming. A lot of stuff online isn't very helpful because it's just people arguing on Reddit or Stack Overflow about what's the best. But I promise it's not as bad as you might think. I don't even know what half the things on this slide are used for. So personally, I think if you're starting out or you're early in your career, the best language, framework, technology you use is going to be whatever keeps you coding. So if you enjoy using Python to do data stuff, keep using it and keep learning what you can do with it. I sort of started off building terrible text-based games in Python, but now I don't really use Python at all. So a lot of what you learn will be transferable to other languages, variables, loops, functions. If you already know the fundamentals, you can pick up new stuff so much quicker. If you do feel pretty confident in the fundamentals, definitely have a go with another language. If you're in that position, it can be really good to start to learn the pros and cons of certain languages, at least at like a high level. And then you can think more about what you're trying to build and what is going to be a good fit. But just be aware that it can take years to learn everything about just one language. So personally, I don't feel like an expert in one particular language, but I do feel fairly confident that I could pick up the basics of any language quite quickly. So where I work in ECS, we have a complete mix of languages and technologies that we use. Currently, I work on our web front end, and we use JavaScript / TypeScript with React. Our mobile front end is currently Swift for iOS and Kotlin for Android, but I know they're working on switching over to using Flutter, which uses the Dart programming language. Our backend is mostly C#.NET, but we do have a couple Java services still. We also have data teams using SQL and Python. Recently, we've had some new technology become part of ECS. So they're using PHP and Scala, I think. Then there's a whole bunch of tools we use to manage code, security, and infrastructure. Stuff like GitHub, AWS, Datadog, Wiz, Google Analytics. I think knowing these tools at like a high level is really good and can separate you from someone that's just learned sort of data structures and algorithms. So we've got all sorts of stuff going on. I think our mobile space is like really interesting at the moment because the engineers there have been flexible in moving from working in Swift or Kotlin to Flutter, which to me shows how important it is to know the fundamentals because it makes you more adaptable. So early on in your career, being adaptable can help you find out what you enjoy and what you're good at. It's hard to say learn one thing. Everything has such a different purpose, but aim to know the fundamentals and it can take you a really long way. Can we get the next slide, please? So I've done 2 front-end rotations, so getting close to a year in front-end experience. As a front-end engineer, I work a lot with product designers to build whatever they come up with into the web or mobile app. Essentially, they will give us designs of what they want the page to look like, and we just have to work out the code changes to make that achieves their designs. Sounds fairly simple, but there's often a lot of back and forth about what's realistic and what's going to be a total nightmare to implement. But in my current team, I'm working on ECS's marketplace. So marketplace is part of our web and mobile apps. you can use it to find credit cards and loans that are available from different companies, mainly banks. We call these lenders. So something I worked on recently was testing out a different page design to see if we could get more people clicking out to the lender websites and applying for credit cards and loans. So we're constantly optimizing the page to try and make it as easy as possible for customers to find decent offers. But the change I made this time was to sort of automatically scroll the app down past the navigation, remove some of the white space and shrink some of the just UI elements a bit. The goal of that was to show more products when you first load the page, because generally we found that leads to more people clicking on products. So clicking out to like the lender websites and applying for stuff. So that's one example, but we're constantly doing things like fixing bugs, improving accessibility and security. Yeah, that's just a snippet of what front end is like, but the gist of it is that you work on sort of UI, UX changes to web or mobile apps. And I think Ali is doing the back end.
Yeah, thanks, George. So I've spent sort of all of my time on the back end side, mainly working with C# and .NET. So backend is more sort of like your backbone of how everything works. And a simple example to understand what that work may look like is, for example, from when I was working on lots of different services for identity verification, and we wanted to have different scores for different bits of data that we had coming in. So, for example, your address score, your name score, etc. So say there will be a new requirement come in saying we need to add an address score into the identity verification part. And then that will come to you from the business analysts. You'll sort of sit down together with all of the team and discuss the scope of that work, what should or shouldn't be included in that. And then when everyone agrees that this piece is understood, when you eventually go to pick it up, you'll essentially take that ticket and translate that logic into code. So you'll be using a lot of object-oriented programming. And if you're not familiar with that, it means writing code in such a way that the different pieces can be well maintained and reused in other places. You'll be doing your testing of all of the different pieces of the code that you're writing. And then when you're happy with that development part, how everything works, you're happy that all cases are covered. You would have also probably considered things like, say, if there's an unexpected input coming into the application, there's some error handling for it so that the user knows why they're getting an error, and they're able to then fix that request. So when you're happy with all that, you'll essentially go back to your product owner in the team and you'll present your work and show how it works. And then at a later time, you may show that work to your stakeholders and the rest of the team as well. So different teams will have like different versions of how that process works, but essentially you'll always follow these key parts of agreeing on what's required, then developing that code and testing it and showing how it works to the stakeholders. And can we get the next slide? So where can a career in software engineering take you? On the bit of like the stack, you could either be specializing in the front end or the back end, or say you could be interested in both and you may want to be working as a full stack engineer. And if you find that you're someone who's more interested in the infrastructure and sort of like how the different pieces of tech we use, how they all like fit together, then you may become interested in DevOps or in cloud engineering. And as you go through your career and you become more senior, you may find that you're given an opportunity to lead a team. So you could be a lead developer who supports more junior members of the team, focuses on things like the tech design and enforcing some best practices for coding. And then outside of software engineering, there's also lots of ways in which you could transfer your skills. So by now, you probably would have noticed that there's a lot more that goes into the field than just coding. You pick up lots of skills such as collaboration, analyzing data, sort of thinking from the user perspective as well. And these could all be useful to you in other areas like data science or working in an analyst role or in a more product-oriented role. Could we have the next slide, please? So now I'll take you through some pros. So my biggest pros are the job prospects. I think software engineering is a growing field and businesses are always interested in new digital products and they need people to build them. Another one is the opportunity to innovate and create. So if you're someone who likes building things, making things, then this could be a really good career choice for you. And there's problem solving every day as well. So that means that it's never boring. You always have something interesting to get your teeth stuck into. And it's something that you can learn as you go as well, which I think is a really big pro, because there's no like certain qualifications you have to get to go from one level to another. And there's no exams, which is really quite nice when you've just finished university. So I'll pass on to George, who will talk you through the cons and what's exciting.
Yeah, so the cons, despite what sort of a lot of people say, learning to code really isn't easy. It definitely depends on the person and sort of how you think. I know a lot of people find coding really quite frustrating and it can be hard to push past that. I think there's a bit of a disconnect between what you might learn at university and what might be useful in the industry as well. But what's exciting is that you never really stop learning if you're a software engineer. And if you enjoy learning new things, there's sort of no limit to what you can learn. Early in your career, you should get loads of space to learn, and there's tons of interesting stuff you can learn about. ChatGPT at the moment makes it easier than ever to sort of learn a new skill, but don't cheat. Get it to teach you and not just give you the answers. The most sort of exciting part of the job for me is working on products that get used by so many people. We're constantly trying to innovate, come up with better ways to solve our technical challenges and come up with ideas to improve our products. I like to think I've helped people in all sorts of financial situations, but I think this does apply to all tech roles, really. We're all sort of working on new ideas or just improving what we've got, which is interesting to me because you never really know what you're going to be working on next. Yeah, I think I'm passing to Amy.
Yes, thank you. So next, we're just going to move on to Experian's application process. So some of you may have seen already, others of you might not be aware, but we have got a graduate software engineer role live at the minute. So it's live for the next couple of weeks. So we know there may be some people on the call who are potentially thinking about making an application. So wanted to give you some advice on how to really make your application stand out. So our application process, like you'll see on the screen, it is a 4-stage process. So it starts with a CV application, which you sort of submit on our portal. You can add a cover letter as well, but that's not essential. That's up to you whether you want to include that. And I guess our top tips around CVs really are to really take the time, firstly, tailoring your CV to Experian and to the opportunity that you're applying to. So we know that can take a bit of time. We know you'll be applying for lots of different organisations, but really taking that time to tailor your CV really helps you in the long run, because we do get a lot of applications here at Experian. So if you submit a really generic CV, it just doesn't make you stand out generally. So that's probably my top piece of advice around your CV application. And also, like it says on the screen there as well, use ChatGPT and AI with caution when you're making job applications. So we know ChatGPT can be really useful, for example, maybe getting a bit of a format of a CV or a bit of a flow going, but all of the content needs to be your content, because ChatGPT, it can generate some quite robotic CVs or CVs that lack personality or lack authenticity. And that's something that's really important to us here at Experian. So they're my top 2 tips for your CV application to really make sure that you stand out. After that CV application stage, if you're successful after that stage, you'd go through to some online assessments. So those assessments would be a situational judgment test, which is basically sort of a bit of a behavioural test. And then we also do a general ability assessment, it's called. So it's a type of cognitive assessment that sort of incorporates numerical reasoning and those types of tests you might be more familiar with. So our top tip for that online assessment stage really is to do some practice beforehand. I think there's been a lot of studies and research, and generally the more people practice, the better you get at interpreting the question, and obviously then that helps your score to improve as well. So do some practice assessments. There's lots that you can do online. Some of your universities might also have access to platforms that you can practice on as well. So that's our top tip around that online assessment piece. If you're successful after the online assessment stage, you'd then go through to a one-way recorded video interview, which is then watched by a member of our team. So you'd have 4 questions that you have a minute to respond to each one. Again, my top tip around that one is around the use of ChatGPT and AI as well, because it does become really apparent when somebody's just reading off a screen. So really do try and have the confidence to tackle that video interview on your own. What we say, especially at the video interview stage, is we're not actually looking for perfection. We're not looking for the absolute perfect polished answer. We're looking for your personality to come through a little bit. And it really is about learning a little bit more about you and what you like and what you're interested in. So that is my top tip around that video interview stage. If you're successful after that stage, you then go through to our virtual assessment centres. So our assessment centres take place online, so on Teams. The day basically is made up of a group exercise where you're working with other students and graduates, and then a one-to-one interview with 2 of our hiring managers as well. You'd also get the chance during the day to network with some of our current graduates as well, where that's got a completely unassessed part of the day, and it's just purely your opportunity to ask them lots of questions and find out more about their experiences and obviously understand if it is the right opportunity for you. So that's our 4-stage process, and hopefully that's just been useful for you to take on board and take into any application processes you go through, really. Really taking that time, like I said, to tailor your CVs, do research before your interviews, like it says on the slide as well, can really help to make you stand out. So it's well worth doing if you are going through any application processes. So I did mention as well that we have got a graduate software engineer role live at the minute. So if you are interested in having a look at that role or applying for that role, then you can scan the QR code. I will drop the link in the chat in a second as well, in case that QR code isn't working for anybody. So yeah, have a look at that role. It is a Nottingham-based role, that particular one, and it is closing on Thursday, the 6th of February. So you've got a couple of weeks to apply for that one. If Nottingham isn't quite the right location for you, we will be going live in the next few weeks with a graduate software engineer role based in London. So if you are interested in that one, then keep your eyes peeled, because yeah, that one will be coming out in a couple of weeks as well. So what I'll just do, if I just flick onto this next slide, that QR code there is for you to scan. So if you're interested in any other opportunities, so if you're interested in that London role, then scan that QR code as well. And what you can do is register your interest and we'll notify you as soon as that role becomes available. But what I'll really quickly just do is just drop the link in the chat as well for the role that's live now. So you've all got that. Okay. Perfect. So that's the end of sort of the information we've got to run through with you today. I guess it's over now for if anybody has any questions. So if you have any questions, please either drop them in the chat or the Q&A. Let me just load that up. Perfect. So we've got a few questions here. And what I can do is if I start with Ali on question 1, but then Joy and George, you might have some different views as well. So the first question, Ali, is what skills do you think are most important for somebody starting in a coding role?
Yeah, so I think what I've found to be the most important is communication. I didn't really know how important it was to have that skill, but it's not just sort of like sitting in your corner as you might expect and I don't know, having to be some sort of a genius and just like cracking it all out on your own. It's not quite like that. You need to be able to communicate with your team, with stakeholders, and sometimes you may swarm on a certain piece of work with other people. So you'd want to stay closely in touch with them, agree on how it's going to be split out. So there's all of those things that come into play. And I think another one is wanting to learn and being curious. I actually know lots of engineers that come from all sorts of different academic backgrounds, but they're great engineers because what they have in common is that they're just really inquisitive and they want to find the answer. And they're also comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when you start working on something new, it can sometimes feel a little bit discouraging and maybe even a little scary, but sort of being able to accept that and just stay curious, want to figure out how it all works, that will take you a long way.
Perfect, thank you. Joy or George, is there anything else you'd add to that one at all?
I'll add to the sort of communication thing that I think you've got to be open to criticism because so much, like every line of code you write is going to have your team look at it or some people in your team look at it, and sometimes you might not write it perfect or they might disagree with the way you've done it, and you've got to sort of be open to, yeah, is this the right thing I'm doing? Am I learning? Is there a better way to do this? Yeah.
Joy, is there anything you'd add as well, or does that sort of cover it from your perspective?
Yeah, I would agree that like communication is a really important skill to have. Like as mentioned before, like talking with your team and things like if you need any help and not just staying stuck. I also think that another one is just like being proactive in like trying new things and just getting stuck in. Because I think when I first started, I found it really helpful just to like alongside learning, I found it helpful to just get stuck in working with actual code. And that's how I learned how to code even faster, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. So we have had another question come in, and it's can we discuss the distinction between full stack and front end and back end? I don't know which of you might want to take that one, but could you just do sort of a really brief overview, I guess, of the differences?
For me, I mean, full stack is sort of just combined front end and back end. Usually, if you're in front end, you're sort of more specialized at just building out UI, UX. And back end is kind of API work. It's kind of how do you interact with databases or how do you pull different information in for the front end to consume. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else has a different idea.
No, does that cover it?
I think that's a really good overview. But do you think if you want to think of it in terms of like an example, front end could be like, say, how something is like, I don't know, how your, I don't know, say your credit score, how your credit score is displayed and shown to you and how you interact with the page. And back end is like, how is that credit score calculated?
Perfect, thank you. We have had another question, which I'm happy to take as well. So somebody has asked, if you have no computer science degree or tech degree, would I still be able to apply for the roles? And if so, what experience or skills would be good to get? So yes, you'd absolutely still be able to apply for the roles. We have had quite a few graduates join us over the last few years who haven't come from a STEM background. One thing I would say in terms of that experience or skills that it'd be good to get is whether you can do sort of a coding boot camp. I know places like Code First Girls offer them. There's lots of other ones available online as well. So doing some, I guess like a boot camp or a course online on coding and making sure that's sort of clear in your CV as well. Anything like that that's showing that you have got an applied interest in the area would really help your application to stand out as well. But yeah, definitely would still consider your application. So we've had another question. Just let that just refresh a sec. What sort of specific tasks will be involved in a typical day-to-day in your roles? So I know there may not be sort of a typical day because I know everything changes quite quickly. And I guess you'll be working on different projects, but could you all maybe give a really quick overview of what a general day might look like? If we start with Joy Ying, is that okay?
Yes. So normally every day for my team, we have a stand up, which is where you discuss with your team any user stories that you're currently working on and if you need help with anything. And then usually we just code, but I guess we have Teams as a form of communication. So if you need any help or any questions, people would normally add that to the chat and answer it. In terms of user stories, sometimes like we might have to write tests so that we might have to communicate with the QA people, or you might have other meetings such as triaging stories. So that's like what I mentioned before, like you're breaking down stories and making sure that it has a certain criteria. But yeah, typically throughout the week, there's not much to do, but there's sometimes meetings that are important. Yeah.
Perfect. Ali, what about a day-to-day in your role?
I think in that way it's quite similar where you've got your stand-up, which is usually in the morning. You may have some other meetings with the team later from that day to look at new pieces of work coming in, to discuss them with your team, ask any questions, either about what is required or how it should be approached. And then sort of like an estimate of how complex or how long that piece of work is going to take. And then it's definitely not as many meetings as people in other roles will have. So the rest of the day you'll probably spend on working with other people and maybe helping them with certain things that they're struggling with, or you'll be like progressing the tickets that you're working on.
Perfect, thank you. George, does that sort of summarise your day-to-day as well?
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, I think I'd say we try to aim to spend most of your time coding and not in meetings too. We do also have things like, oh, if we notice an issue on the site, we have to kind of push things through really quick. That might be something that sort of you all have to jump on. They're always fun when you like looking through live logs of stuff and trying to figure out what's gone wrong. Yeah, but I think we covered everything there.
Yeah, perfect. We did have a question, and strangely, I can't see it now, so I don't know if my screen's just frozen. But we had a question around the development that you get in the role as well. So the graduate software engineering roles is part of our graduate programs. So for the first 2 years of the role, you would be on our graduate development program. I don't know if any of you could sort of explain a little bit on in terms of what you get up to on the graduate development program. Give us a brief overview.
Yeah, I can take that. So I really liked that starting with Experian on a grad scheme as opposed to a junior, there was this really nice sense of community between the grads. We would have a lot of different training sessions to help us develop skills that were sort of transferable to all roles, like our leadership skills or how we adapt to change and how can we reflect on where we've come and where we want to take things forward. I know there's been lots around presentation skills, and yeah, it's just a really great program where there's lots of support from the organisers of the programme, but also from all of the graduates that you'll get to meet and interact with.
Brilliant, thank you. Is there anything? Go for it, George.
Yeah, what we did something like last year. This is just an example of like something you do in early careers where all of the graduates split up into groups, and then each group had to come up with different ways to raise money for a charity they chose. I think a lot of people ended up doing walks, but there was some fun things there too, bake sales and all sorts. Yeah.
Well, we have had another question as well. What have you all found to be the best thing about working for Experian? Joyen, do you want to go first?
Yes, so I think the best thing about working Experian is that I actually feel quite comfortable in the environment, like being around people. I feel like there's not really much of a hierarchy in terms of like the leaders and employees. I feel like it's quite easy to talk to anyone. And I really think that Experian really cares about the employees. Like there's so many benefits that you can have, and also flexibility with work hours and stuff.
Perfect. Ali?
I think two things for me. One thing that I've really enjoyed is the volunteering. Experian let you volunteer for 3 days each year and contribute to your chosen cause. So that's like a really nice way to give something back to the community. And another one is that I feel like Experian is quite good at building really good teams where people are supportive and are happy to give you a hand with anything that you need.
What about you, George?
Yeah, I was going to say supportive teams. This is my third team Experian, but everyone's been so great. It's they're all there to try and help you and just improve you. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And I have just seen a question pop up as well around hybrid working. So all of our graduate roles are hybrid roles. So you'd spend part of the time in the office, part of the time working from home if you want to. We do have some graduates that go into the office quite a bit. We definitely say at the beginning of your program, when you first start, you'd be in the office quite a bit more when you're kind of picking up what the role is. We say it's really good often to sit in an office and learn from other people around you. It can be quite hard if you're trying to do that from home. But yeah, all of our roles are remote, are hybrid, sorry. So you spend part of the time in the office, part of the time working from home. I don't know if George, Joying and Ali, what is your sort of hybrid working pattern like at the minute?
I tend to do sort of 2 days a week, but it's not expected of me. When I first started, I came in every day just because there was grads in every day. So we just had like a little group that we'd work with, and that was fun. But it sort of gradually slowed down as like more and more people just want to work from home, and yeah. But I'm not expected. I think I'm expected to come in once a quarter in my team, but I think it depends on what team you're in.
What about yourself, Joying?
So I also come in like twice a week, but it's also not expected of me to come in. So some weeks, if I'm not feeling that good, I might just stay home. Usually for my team, we would have like a day for engineering teams to come in. So that's usually a Wednesday for me. But I also sometimes come in on a Thursday because that's when like other grads come in. So it's a great opportunity to catch up with them.
Yeah. Is that around the same for you, Ali? Is yours any different?
I have to say that I don't really come in the office that much these days. I think the team that I'm in now works really quite well as like a mainly remote team. We spend a lot of time like talking to each other on video calls, and yeah, you may like, I don't know, just work alongside someone for a couple hours working on different pieces on a video call, which seems to be quite common for us. But we do probably all come in the office maybe like once every other month, and then it's like more of a social thing where we go out for some food later and just have a catch up.
Yeah, perfect. I can see we've had a few recruitment-based questions as well, so I'll try and just cover those now as well. But I think we've already covered, you don't need to have a degree in computer science. We're open to sort of various different backgrounds as well. We have had a question around, I guess, the age limit for a graduate programme. There is no age limit for a graduate programme at all. I guess, like with any other applicant, we'd just be looking to understand why you think you'd benefit from a graduate programme. But that would be the same for all applicants. So anybody can apply for our graduate programme. We just say you need to have graduated in the last 3 years. But obviously you can go to university at any stage of your life. I think we had a question as well around location. So are there any opportunities in Cardiff? I'm afraid not. We don't have sort of a presence in Cardiff. But our opportunities will be based in Nottingham and London. We had another question that I can't find again, but I think it was around internships. So we don't offer short-term internships, but we do offer year in industry placements for university students. So they're for students who are in their third year of their degree, and then they take a year working with an organisation before returning to university to complete their final year. So yeah, we do offer those types of opportunities. We have just had one, I think, as well around deadlines. We've had one around the deadlines for the projects, but just in case anybody needed reminded as well, the deadline for the role applications is Thursday, the 6th of February, so in a couple of weeks' time. So in terms of deadlines for projects, what are the deadlines like? Do you generally are you working on things for quite a long time before the deadline, or are the projects that you work on sort of shorter and sharper projects? What's it like for each of you in terms of those project deadlines?
I mean, I've not had that much experience because I'm working on my first project, but I feel like since it's kind of a new product, so it's an acquisition called Inzeta, so we're just like recoding everything. So I just joined in September, but I know that before that they were currently already working on it, but we expect to release the new version this April. So I think that in terms of projects, my first project, I would say a year, but I'm not quite too sure.
Right. Ali or George, have you got any sort of further insight on your projects?
Yeah, I think it really depends. But essentially we tend to plan quarterly on what we will like do over that time. And you'll usually find that there's a lot of like large projects going on all at the same time. But when you pick up work as part of that project, it's like a small piece that just adds to it. So in a way, like you get to see a lot of a variety of different things.
What about yourself, George?
Yeah, similar. We sort of planned for the quarter, but we break down projects into different t-shirt sizes, which could be like a sprint, 2 weeks, up to like the whole quarter. So it sort of depends on the project, but yeah. So I guess yeah, just depends on how long we think it's going to take.
Yeah, perfect. Well, so I know we're coming up to time now, so we'll just finish with one final, I guess, tip or piece of advice for the students on the call. Is there one piece of advice that you would all give to the students if they were interested in starting a career in coding or tech? Start with George. You look like you're thinking about it. Have you got a top tip?
Yeah. I don't know. I think always be learning, always be open to learn new things.
Yeah.
Yeah, because things are constantly changing, and it's good to just, yeah, always try and be open.
Yeah, definitely. Ali, have you got a tip you would give to students?
I think whenever you approach anything sort of tech-wise, just stay curious. Like don't expect to get it from the get-go. Part of it is making certain mistakes to learn from them. It's all part of the journey.
Perfect. Joying, is there anything from you?
I would say that like tech is not just about coding. So one tip is that you should try like different opportunities such as like volunteering, just to build those soft skills for like communication and working in a team.
Well, I'm just dropping in the chat now because I see a couple of people have asked for the link for the role again. So I'm just dropping that in the chat now. And we have had a question about when our other roles going live as well. And we've got roles going live weekly, really, over the coming months. So do just keep an eye on our website. You can register your interest as well, like I said, and then you'll get notified when other opportunities come up. But I know we've just got to 3 o'clock. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you so much for all of your questions as well. If there's any that we've missed, we will go through them. Yeah, and make sure that we've answered them all. But thank you so much for all of your engagement as well. And yeah, thank you, Joy, Ali and George as well. Yeah, hope everybody has a lovely weekend. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I just wanted to jump on really quickly and say a huge thank you to Amy, Juying, Ali and George for joining us, and also thank you to everyone who has joined as well. I wanted to just mention an insight opportunity that we are having with Experian coming up on the 3rd of Feb. I am going to pop the application kind of page just into the chat. If you want to have a look, see if you're interested and would like to apply, then it's a really great opportunity for you to get kind of another insight into the company and kind of hear from other Experian representatives as well about their experience. And just want to say another huge thank you to all of our kind of Experian team today, and I hope you all have a lovely weekend as well. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.